Hello, did you know that there's racism in real estate? So, today's discussion will tackle anything to do with racism and discrimination in real estate. Welcome back to Wealth and Wellness with Grace. This has been a struggle of mine. Anytime I see injustice or discrimination, I feel really bad about it. And that's why I actually became a real estate investor and now an agent. And so when you understand the history of racism in this country, you know that it stemmed back in slavery days, right? So sometimes we think, okay, after the emancipation from slavery, everything changed and all that seemed to not exist anymore. That can be a misconception because who perpetrates the racism and the discrimination? It's people, right? And then sometimes all that is embedded in systems. So it takes a long time for some of those systems to really change, and we as a people have to be the ones to change it. And so sometimes, and which is also a misconception, I used to think, okay, as a black person, as a minority, there's no racism in minorities. That is a big misconception. I've seen so much racism and discrimination among minorities. You see? And I always wonder, I'm like, you know what? If other people are being discriminatory against you, why would you actually discriminate against other minorities? But sadly, people don't do it without even knowing that they're actually doing it. So it says racism is a form of prejudice that assumes that the members of racial categories have distinct characteristics, that these differences result in some racial groups being inferior to others. So you see, it's a struggle for power. One group wants to be superior than the other. So that's really what racism is about. And then it can be also, it causes a negative connotation and can also lead to violence. So that's why it's not a great thing. And discrimination, on the other hand, is the differential treatment of members of different ethnic, religious, national, and other groups. So discrimination also is manifested in prejudices. And therefore, it's also negative and causes hostility and also injustice in different ways. So in real estate, I don't know if you understand steering, gentrification, the wealth gap, and redlining. So those are issues that actually still exist in real estate. So let's start with steering. As an agent, when the client sends me, okay, this is the neighborhood I want to see, maybe purchasing. If you're not careful, you might, okay, as an agent, you might send them other properties in another neighborhood. That's like steering them from one neighborhood, and that's not good. You see, so you have to be cautious what you're doing and how you're helping your client, because you can't say, oh, this is just the Indian community. I can't send somebody outside of the Indian. They won't do great in the neighborhood. Says who? Are you the neighborhood police? You see, you don't get to choose for your clients. And I've seen some people do that, right? Because they're like, oh, the neighbors don't like this and that here, so we'll send the other racial group somewhere else. Says who? Start being gatekeepers in communities, because that's what perpetuates the racism and discrimination. I can say a good example. One of the properties I purchased, the owner sold it to me, and he actually made a comment about it. He said the neighbors don't like black people in this neighborhood. But because he was not for it, he said, I'm going to make sure that you purchase it because I don't care what they say. I don't like racism. And that's why I bought it. So I bought it knowing what the neighbors in the neighborhood don't like. And so every day I knew these people are not for me, but I didn't care because you're not gonna play with me. I'm here to stay. And I made sure I'm not selling. So however much I've got so many people offer me deals to get out, I'm not getting out. And another thing, how actually that also impacts us as minorities, you've heard of sometimes when we move into certain communities, neighbors tend to sell. You see? So if they want to sell, I want to buy. So stop shying away from living in any community. If you can afford it, that's the biggest thing. If you can afford to live there, there's no way you shouldn't live there. And nobody should steer you away from living in that particular community, right? Especially us as Asians, we can't steer people, period. Another thing is the redlining, right? Redlining, where it used to happen a lot, or in common place, it used to be like really common a long time ago, but it still happens to this day. I can say, for example, if a lender says they can't lend in a certain neighborhood, you see, no, you're not supposed to do that. You see, because they might look at the values in the homes in that neighborhood, and maybe looking at the value, some lenders have a specific amount that they can lend towards. I know so many lenders, especially banks, they might not lend less than $90,000 or even $100,000 for a house. So, but you can't say in a particular neighborhood, you see? So it might be just generalized everywhere. They can't lend this certain amount in everywhere, in that area, right? But not, oh, in this neighborhood, we don't lend in this certain neighborhood. Because then that's discriminatory, and you're not supposed to do that. So some people might, but please, if you're living or if you're working, then they are gatekeepers and stopping so many other people to grow and thrive. Another thing could be the discrimination in as the wage gap. So the wage gap is a serious issue. So if you look at the wage gap between whites and blacks, you see the rich and the poor is a big wealth gap, right? And this is different. We're talking about the wage gap, and now we're talking about the wealth gap. It's two different things here. So the wage gap is in as what they pay a black person, male, is not the same wage as they pay a black woman. It's not the same wage as they pay a white woman, and it's not the same wage they pay a white male. So these are 4 different wages. You see, you might be doing the same work. The white man is gonna get more. Then it's gonna be more likely the black male, and then it will be the white female, and then lastly, the black woman. So this is really discouraging, and that's why most times when I think about it, that's why I really like entrepreneurship, because I get to define my wage, right? I get to decide if I want to work here or accept this particular contract or work with this company, or I don't want to do this. So you get to do so many different things as an entrepreneur, because I don't like discrimination. Like, who does? Because if I'm doing the same job, why do we have all this? This one makes, say for example, I'm a registered nurse. So how are you going to tell me this person makes 50 and I make 30 and we all have the same bills? We also have all the same or similar obligations. It's not fair. So that's why it really hurts me to my core to know that there's a big wage gap, because that's what, so if you're telling me the black female, right, for $1 compared to a white woman, on $1, everything is going up, right? All of us face the inflation the same. When we have to to get houses, guess what? They're looking at my income, right? So that's how the wealth gap comes in too. Because if I can't accumulate enough, because I can't save enough, I'm making the lowest, and then I can't save enough, I can't afford to send my kids to great schools, I can't stay in a great neighborhood, I can't buy a better house, right? So to accumulate wealth, I can't afford the necessities of daily living. So that really definitely affects especially black women. So that's not great. And so when you see a lot of black women on welfare, and not just black women, when you see a lot of women, period, on welfare, it's not that they choose to be on welfare. No. It's because of the wage gap, which is causing the wealth gap, and it perpetuates. It's just a cycle. Because then your family member continues with the next generation, and then the next generation, so you have to do everything you can to break out of it. And I'll share some solutions what we can do, because some of these things, they've been embedded in systems that if you're not careful, you're going to continue with the same systems, right? So you have to get mentally, You have to figure out what can you do to help yourself and your family to get out of that bondage. And then now let's talk about gentrification. So initially, I'm all for gentrification, really, because to me, I feel like gentrification, you're supposed to be helping the community grow and thrive. The main problem, though, is mostly done in poor and minority communities. If gentrification was done in all communities across the board, then that would be a great thing. The problem is most times we are targeting minorities and the poor. So we get to displace them, and it's not okay. Because once you start gentrifying that area, the other big problem too, the taxes go up. So when the taxes go up, guess what? Somebody who has lived in their neighborhood for 50 years, right? They can't afford those taxes. So even if they're still in the same house, nothing changed on their side, they're just assessing the whole neighborhood. Everything's gonna go up, and before you know it, they can't afford to stay there. And that's the biggest thing I see with gentrification. And the other thing with gentrification is a lot of railroads. You've seen railroads, a lot of interstate. Guess who was displaced to make sure that happened? It was the poor and minorities. And most times they didn't get paid. So a lot of land has been lost. And that's why sometimes I really feel bad when I'm driving on an interstate and I'm like, oh, on a nice interstate straight through. And I'm like, a lot of people had to pay a price for this. And so that causes me to really always think about things differently and be humble, you see. So when I'm thinking about, okay, I'm investing here, I'm really thinking about a lot of those things, like putting a lot of information like that in context. Because a lot of people have sacrificed a big price for all of this stuff, you see. We still have to think about how can we start demonstrating and at least advocating for the people who live in their community. Because if they've been living there, they deserve to stay in their community. So if we can try to find a solution for that, I'm all for gentrification, right? And I'm an investor too, so you have to understand. So it's like I'm really an investor, but I still want people to really stay in their communities. If they choose to sell, then that's fine, you see? But it's not because they couldn't afford the taxes and we rent them out of the community. So now let's talk about some ways, right, that what we can do as a people. Is education, like I'm talking about things now. Recently, I attended a real estate class, and for some reason, one of this particular agent kept talking about different things which were really discriminatory. First of all, she said, I don't accept clients who have FHA. I'm like, okay, so you don't accept clients. You say, okay, because she termed it as they don't have any money. So you get to choose what the client is going to accept for housing. Like, that's not okay. That's discriminatory. She's not supposed to do that, you see? And then she even made a comment about, oh, I don't accept some minorities. I don't deal with some minority groups. I said, like, are they forcing themselves to deal with you? You see? So y'all need to be careful who you're going out there dealing with. Because some people are not interested in assisting you. So just imagine, because she might not come out and tell you straight up, I don't want to deal with you as the agent, but you need to be doing your own research, who you're going out there to assist you. Because that person is not advocating on your behalf. If she's bluntly telling us, all of us in a class, in a real estate class, with 30, 40 people, how she doesn't deal with certain minorities and how she wants this and how she does that. You see? So then this person won't advocate for you. So you be careful who you're going out there for. So educate yourself. Okay? And know that the right people will come. But you have to be ready when they come, you see? Because when they're telling you information like I'm telling you now, do this, and you gotta follow through. So education is definitely a big thing. And also how we can educate ourselves as real estate agents, also being cognizant of the things that we do, you see? Because like one time I had a client who was telling me, oh, Are they black people or are they white people who are going to stay in my house? I say it shouldn't matter. You see, it should not matter who qualifies. In fact, I send them as soon as they sign the lease, that's when I send them the information. It shouldn't matter. Because if I make sure that I'm telling you, oh, it's white person only, that's discriminatory. Then maybe I'm not the right agent for you. You see, because if I just want to collect a check, then I'm also implicit in the discrimination and I'm not going to take it. So I'd rather let my clients know this is discriminatory and I don't appreciate it. I'll send you the information of the clients if who qualifies after they sign the lease. Then you get to deal with them. You can't cancel the lease this time. And that's why I'm still in real estate, because we have a lot of people who don't get it, you see. And this person was a minority. So that's the other thing. This person was a minority, but trying to discriminate against another minority. Long story. But those are things I deal with, okay? And so when I say, sometimes I'm like, my head is running, like, what is wrong with that people? Yes, you all got issues. You gotta get over your issues. You see, because if you don't trust yourself, you can't think everybody who looks like you can't follow through or can't do this or can't do that. It's not true. You see? So it comes from us too. And then I've had long stories, I had so many extra stories, but let's focus. So if you have a client who's looking around in a certain neighborhood and the lender is saying something, you gotta educate your lenders and also have the right lenders. Who are you dealing with? You see? Because some lenders, they might flat out not approve a loan. Doesn't mean the next one won't approve it. Because I've had instances where I was denied loans and I went to the next person and they approved it. So it doesn't mean it's just one time only thing. No. Go to the next person. And if they refuse, then go to the next person too. Do you know that you can get, in a 30-day period, you can try to get different lenders and they'll still run it as one time? You see? Because sometimes we stop there. This person denied me. Maybe they had a different criteria. It doesn't mean the next person won't approve you, especially if you have the process started. And maybe when one person denies you because of such and such, okay, correct it. Before you know it, you go to the next one and they might not deny you. But if you stop there, that stops everything, you see? And you won't build wealth when you don't take action. So you have to keep going. Another thing is also we have to address racism. The problem is if you don't show up to vote, how are these policies going to be passed? You see, and who are we voting for? Because that's another problem. You see, sometimes we don't think about who are the politicians we are voting for. You see, are they actually advocating for our interests? Because that's what it is. Also, are you attending your city council meetings? Because most times we don't think about it, but we can attend football, we can attend all kinds of stuff which don't build us as a community. But when it comes to showing up to vote, come to attending city council meetings, things which will actually impact our lives, we don't show up. You see? So that's really unfortunate, but that's where it's at. That's when we get to make an impact. It might not seem like a big impact initially, but the more you do it, guess what? It compounds. You see, it builds on from there. I can give you a good example. Right now, in Hammond, there is a group home which has been trying to pass the zoning laws to be changed in that particular neighborhood in Hammond. So the last city council meeting, okay, so I want to confess that I don't show up to city council meetings, but I'm always showing up online. So I'm this kind of girl who is always watching every meeting, but online. But I'm going to show up in person, getting on my schedule together. But I don't miss them. I see them online. But this particular city council meeting, they've had like 3 meetings already. Their own Facebook group, they have a Facebook group. They're already passing certain things saying that they don't want that group home to be in their neighborhood. You see, they're already fighting it. So when they showed at the last city council meeting, they were all against it. Or majority of them were against it. And they were ready, like it was serious. It was a heated argument. I think it was over 40 minutes. Different people going up there just mentioning why they don't want a group home in their community. So just imagine if we also show up for matters that concern us, how an impact that would be, you see. But most times we don't do that, you see. Something is happening in the community, before you know it, it just passes because you're not showing up. And that's how things get passed in different communities. And then we look at it like, oh, they just took over. The city council people didn't care that. But when they bring that to motion, you need to show up and say no and stand up. You see, and then maybe not everybody will come, but at least a few people, a few stable people in the neighborhood should be able to come to city council meetings, should be able to advocate for their communities, right? Because if I know something happening in my community, I'm sure I'm coming. I'm showing up, you see? But most times we need to think about that, make the time. And also you need to, that's another point. You need to have your self-confidence. Because this is not for the weak at heart, right? You have to start building yourself up confidently to be able to speak up to matters that concern you. Because if you're not able to communicate it, how is this working? You see, you can't make a point. So start showing up, start working on yourself, build your self-confidence so that such that when you show up to those meetings, your points actually make sense. Right? And the other thing is, this is a big point. I hear a lot of people, I don't need to own a home. I used to be like you. I didn't think it was a big deal to own, but I remember one of my mentors, he sat me down and said, Black people will never be nothing until they own their stuff. You can talk about it, you can demonstrate, you can cry, you can say this, you can shout and yell and talk about everybody, right? Guess what? It's not changing. Racism is going to be here to stay if we don't change. We have to start owning. And that's how I started looking at it. You see, at first, I really felt bad about it. I was like, how are you judging us? How are you judging us? Like, we're doing enough. We are showing up. We are fighting. We are strong. And they're just taking advantage of. That doesn't matter. Words can go so far. Action, action, action. And actions change with economics. You see, if you have some money, people will listen. If you have money, let me repeat it, people will actually listen. I'll give you another good point. Before I used to be on the sidelines and also doing the demonstration and everything. But after I came face to face with those barricades and I realized that what my mentor was saying was right, that this is not changing in this country and no other country. Because you have to realize, who is perpetrating the racism? We talked about one party wants to be superior over the other. So how is the superior party going to benefit from you being superior than them? That's all it is. You see? So they don't benefit from you being superior than them, because then they'll have to take your place. You see? And I'm not saying it's supposed to be a good or bad thing, but you have to realize if it doesn't benefit them, you see, they're not going to do nothing about it. They're comfortable. You see? So you have to do something about it, regardless of how uncomfortable it is. And you have to do something about it by economically impacting yourself and advancing yourself. And how can you do that? Talk about land. You see, build yourself up economically. You see, own something. Then people will reach out to you. What do you think? But if you don't own nothing, who is asking you for anything? Because I remember somebody reached out, there's a builder in my community who recently reached out, and they wanted me to give them or sell some land from one of my properties, sell it to them. You see? But what do you think? But the ball is in my court. You don't own it. You see? Excuse my language. You don't own nothing, they're not going to care. So stop being violent. Use the knowledge to do better. You see, by owning. So that's the biggest takeaway from this, because even that lady in the real estate class, I say, you know what, that's why I became an agent. I'm going to continue educating, and that's why I'm talking about racism and what we can do about it now. The biggest way you can avoid and fight racism is doing much better than them. That's it, than the racists. And then the right people will come, because like how I mentioned, that gentleman who sold his property to me, do you know he dropped the price $100,000 for me to buy it? Because he wanted to make sure a black woman bought this property. 100. That means he invested in me $100,000, and I didn't even have to ask. So people are there who want to see us succeed, and they might not even look like us. Because that's sometimes like, I'm always surprised because people treat you nice sometimes, and you're like, man, when people sometimes don't even treat me kind. And people give you, and they want you to succeed. So just do your part, and the right people will come. Okay, so I hope you found this this topic interesting to you, and I hope you got the courage to really realize that whatever racism you're facing, if you ain't doing nothing, maybe they don't want you to succeed because they know you don't have nothing going on for yourself. But you gotta show them more than you're talking about it. You see? And maybe sometimes we need to just keep quiet, just grind and show results. And I used not to even say nothing. I just said talking and being verbal about this because more people, you see, who look like me used to ask me, Grace, what can I do about this? What can I do? How can I? And so I was like, you know what? If I start talking about it, then I'm helping more than one person. And that's why I really want to talk about things and what and houses here. Because for me, I'd rather be silent and grind in the dark. Because then, you see, I don't want to expose myself, because then that also can endanger you. People can come after you thinking you have all this and they want to take a part of it. You see, your own people, unfortunately. So that's why I don't even talk about much, but I'm really sharing this because I want you to win. I want you to know that I started my business with $100. And that was a borrowed $100 from my own kids' piggy bank. You hear me? And I started that business because I knew if I didn't start then, I would never have started. And I remember since talking to my mentor, when he told me about black people will never be nothing until they own their stuff, I put 2 years on my calendar. That was 2014, you see? And then 15, 16, in really 17, the day that I put the 2-year mark, guess what? I saw my calendar and it said, start your business. I didn't even know a name for the business. And a friend told me, Grace, everybody likes Grace. Why don't you name your business Grace? And that's how I started. And that $100 from my kids' piggy bank. And that was because to start an LLC, you technically need $100, right? So 105, right? So I had to put that $100 in my debit card so I can finish the payment online to register my business as an LLC, Peace of Homes. And when I started, I didn't have a lot of money, but I knew that I was gonna make it because I was determined. I was passionate about it, and I knew what I wanted to do for the community. I didn't want to just wait until I got all this money, because sometimes we do that. We wait. I wait until I have everything figured out before I start getting the house. Start now. What can you do right now? I share different topics about how what you need to do, you see, to get a house. Look at those videos. They're here for you. You gotta start working on yourself. The small things matter. Because you're not doing your part. Do you know you're impacting the whole community? Because I know this is a run, but after my research, I found that over 50% of black people don't even have credit. That's a problem. You are declining the community. You are the downfall. If you don't have your credit figured out, and you have bad or poor credit, you are the problem. And I read a quote one time, which seemed, I didn't like the quote. It said, the best thing you can do for poor people is not be poor with them. At first I looked bad. I was like, what are you saying about poor people? Because I used to be that kind of person who I didn't want anybody to talk about anything about poor people. Poor people are supposed to be giving. They are this. No. why are you a poor person? You see, and I'm not saying poor inners. Poor can be up here. You see, your mind, you're not exposing yourself because you don't want to expose yourself. So it's up here. It's a mental thing. You see, poverty is a mindset. Because I'm not saying you're not having money now. You see, because I told you I stay with $100. But that $100 has turned into over $1 million net worth. You see? So I'm telling you, you can do it too. But get out of that poverty mindset. Because you're not working on your credit thinking, I don't need credit, okay? Guess what? The wealthy have things figured out. And if they tell you that they don't need credit, it's because they can't afford it. But when you have to leverage wealth, you have to do different things, okay? That's you using that credit to leverage to get more wealth. And that's what I was able to do. And I'm telling you things that helped me in merely 6.5 years. You see? So I'm not saying this for, I've done this for 20 years. No. I've just come to America, not even 20 years ago. So you've been in America all your life or most of your life. So use some of these systems. Because if you don't, guess what? Somebody else is using them and you're still going to be deprived. So you might as well start using them. So I know I'm going off topic, but I'm really passionate for you to grow. I really want you to get out of your comfort zone. Stop talking about it. I want you to be about it. I'm running for you, and I know you can do it. You see, because it takes one step, one single step, and that is making a choice today. Whatever you decide to do today. You might look at some of the things and think they were offensive. I'm sorry, okay? Then maybe it's challenging you to think different, because that's how I felt too. When my mentor said different things like, stop giving money away, start investing in yourself first. Sometimes, you see, because if you're used to doing something opposite, of course it's going to be irritating, you see, because you're used to that different way of thinking. But that means you have to grow. You see, start thinking about it. Okay, what is he actually saying? What does that actually do for me? You see? And then when you start thinking about that, because that also takes you being humble. Being humble, saying, okay, I don't know everything. Because sometimes that's the mindset thing, thinking we know it all. We don't want to listen to anybody else. But then they're doing much better than we are. So you need to start thinking about that too. You see? So I hope you learned a thing or two. And please, let's continue this in the comments below, because I really want us to thrive. And I'm hoping that we can combat this racism and discrimination, because it's all up here. Because if we are all doing better for ourselves and building and growing, guess what? The racists will cease to exist. You hear me? Because then they won't stop you. You will keep going. You'll be grinding. In fact, they'll be ashamed. Do you know the haters sometimes? They try to beat you down when you're low and down, right? But when they see you growing, guess what? They will be bound to support you. So that's what you do for them, because you impress them that you can't be you can't be beat, right? You can't be beat. You can't be overcome. And things will work out for you. Anyways, I said enough. Until next time, stay blessed.